Hello, I'm Edward Thompson. Welcome to today's episode of Pictures on My Mind. In today's episode, I'm going to answer a very simple question. It should be simple. What is documentary photography? And the reason I'm doing this now is in the UK, there's an organisation called PhotoWorks, and they put out an open call, I think, for a mentorship scheme, and they are interested in photographers who were in post-documentary photography as a genre. Stuff like that scares me now because in 2016, one of Donald Trump's administrative team, I can't remember what she did, but her name was Kellyanne Conway, and when Donald Trump was found to be saying things which might not be true, she said, oh no, they're just alternative facts. Yeah, which then led us on to this whole kind of post-truth era, which is also equally terrifying. So for me, when I hear a word like post-documentary photography, it just makes me think of post-truth. And I was looking on Twitter about this, and a lot of people were kind of piling on a bit. A lot of people slate documentary photographers for lots of different reasons. And I thought, you know what? Let's go back. So in a library, I found this amazing Time Life book on documentary photography. And yeah, I'd never seen it before. I just picked it up after this being kind of in my brain. I thought, let's have a little look at it. And there's some essays at the start. Some of it I kind of agree with, some I don't, but it's a really nice little mini history lesson into what kind of documentary photography was and how it started. So yeah, let's dig in. So it's a Time Life book. It's a shot from one of the FSA, Farming Security Administration photographers, and that was Walker Evans, and what they liked, obviously, cutting edge. This is early 70s. It's a photo of photos. Ooh, you know, Inception. And it says, on the cover, a documentary within a documentary. This picture just suggests the way an Alabama tenant farm family lived. I mean, you know, it's pretty cute now, right? Because how many people doing documentaries would photograph, you know, other people's photos? You watch any documentary on Netflix, how often are they showing photos made by the family, yada yada, but I love that on the cover, they're like, yeah, cutting edge. There's a bunch of chapters in the book, and I'm just going to look at Crusaders with Cameras, the Photo League, and Honouring Humanity. But first, I thought I'd read this lovely little text. The term documentary photography came into use during the Depression years, when telling pictures of poverty-stricken farmers awakened Americans to the need for social reform. And in many minds, this field of photography still suggests pictures of the Dust Bowl, of rural hardship and urban slums. Yet, as this book shows, there is, and always has been, far more to documentary photography than the recording of the world's ills, for there is so much more to document than suffering and poverty. Faraway places and exotic peoples, quirks of nature and of society, the whole gamut of emotions and relationships. The subject matter is indeed almost unlimited, and I totally agree with that. Your subject matter as a documentary photographer is unlimited. It's anything you want. Okay, so yeah, maybe, you know, people might shirk a bit at the exotic places, whatever, and people thing, but, you know, you can do anything, okay? I will get into that in a later video, but yeah, priority one here, like a camera is made with a lens pointing that way. You don't just have to photograph yourself or people like you. You will learn so much engaging in other people's lives, okay? So yeah, be bold, be brave. If you want to photograph someone, a group of place of people, whatever, you just do it. So that's it, there we go. Then is every photograph a documentary? Not really, for it must convey a message that sets it apart from a landscape, a portrait, a street scene. It may record an event, but the event must have some general significance, more than the specific significance of a news photo. Well, you know, later on, man, I mean, I love the thing of documentary photography where you just photograph life, and that's it. That's all that's included. And it might be a street scene, it might be a portrait, you know, it might be a landscape. So, but anyway, this is early 70s, and they're still sort of, you know, as they say here later on, that they felt the sort of documentary photography genre only really started in the 30s. It may record character or emotion, but again, of some general social significance. It is more than personally revelatory as a portrait is. Yet whether it shows us family life in Paris or in Maine, the central square of Peking or a stretch of US Route 66, a cafe in Hungary or a sharecropper's cabinet in a suburban living room, the documentary photograph tells us something important about our world, and in the best examples makes us think about the world in a new way. Well, wouldn't you know? So there we go. So I'm just going to skip through this little bit here, apart from this text, which again is kind of nice. So they've got a little definition here in italics. Let's go for it. Documentary photography, a depiction of the real world by a photographer whose intent is to communicate something of importance, to make comment that will be understood by the viewer. Now, that's cool, and lots of documentary photographers do that. You know what? Sometimes I've done some pretty cool documentary photographs, as I've seen others do, which maybe don't communicate something clearly, maybe they're a little bit nebulous, maybe they're kind of hard to read, and maybe in that there's something special going on. But anyway, on a cursory inspection, a good documentary photograph may seem little more than a snapshot, but under more careful scrutiny it generally reveals itself to be a visual representation of a deeply felt moment, as rich in psychological and emotional meaning as a personal experience vividly recalled. That sounds cool. That the attributes of a documentary photograph seem contradictory may be a result of the newness of the term. It was not even coined until the 1930s, and then it was linked in the public mind with documentary films, movies that without fictionalised plot usually examine the lives of little-known people in remote places. These films, unlike the routine travelogue, were a visual commentary on the world. The same kind of communication had long been provided by still photographs, but until that point they had never been dignified by categorisation as something special. The photographs made by the pioneers of documentary photography look quite different from those being carried by many of its modern practitioners, well, modern practitioners like 50 years ago, yet they are fundamentally the same, all comment on reality, and the apparent differences develop logically as the form progress from the simple to the complex. But let's just flip ahead, let's get into it. So I just wanted to jump to this chapter, Crusaders with Cameras, okay, and it covers two kind of the titans. So Jacob Riis and Lewis Hine. Okay, so Jacob Riis was a kind of journalist, let me get that right, and he was basically trying to photograph kind of slum conditions and basically trying to, you know, the whole line you'd always say, you know, giving a voice to a voiceless, or trying to do that kind of thing. So yeah, as a crusading reporter, Riis wrote expose articles in his paper and complained personally to city health officials with scant result. But he was resourceful as he was committed, and he no sooner learned that newly invented flashlight powder permitted photographs indoors than he took a camera inside overcrowded flats and filthy cafes. So he was like, wow, we have flash. I can go inside. I can show the conditions of where these people live in these slums. And yeah, that's exactly what he did. But again, you know, between Riis and Lewis Hine, just, you know, amazing imagery. What's this say? 5 cents a spot, New York, 1989. You just see how many people are crowded into this room. When Jacob Riis shot the flop house right, the reproduction of photographs by photo engraving was in its infancy. To illustrate his article, How the Other Half Lives, Scribner's magazine in 1889 had Riis's photographs transcribed into drawings. But some of the reality of the squalor was lost. When Riis submitted his account of slum overcrowding to the City Health Board, he found that his arguments did not make much of an impression until my negatives, still dripping from the darkroom, came to reinforce them. From them, there was no appeal. Thanks to his photographic persuasion, a park replaced the block on which his flop house stood. So yeah, man, I mean, that's pretty amazing, isn't it? Like photographing documentary photography as evidence. There's a situation, it's terrible. That's not real, look, it's real, okay? And that's what he did. Baxter Street Court, New York, 1888. Bohemian cigar makers working at home, 1890. And there's a little text for this one. It says, photographs such as the one on the left of children loitering in a slum alley, littered with garbage and fallen bricks, help to bring about truancy laws to keep the young in school and to provide playgrounds for their use when school was not in session. Yeah, wild. Cellar dwelling on Ludlow Street, 1890. Indoors, the reeking tenements had peeling walls, canted floors and little ventilation. The woman living in the cramped cellar dwelling shown above has at last surrendered to the pervasive filth. Her dishes, her floor, even her clothes have clearly gone long unwashed. From these tenements, the outraged photographer wrote, comes the vexed question, is life worth living? Yeah. Yeah, here we go. So this shot on the right here. Night school students at a class after working all day often found it difficult to pay attention. Through such situations were hardly ideal, the reformer photographer agreed that night schools such as those provided by the Children's Aid Society were better than no schooling at all. And yeah, that kind of ties into the next photographer, which is Lewis Hine, and trying to abolish child labour law. So here we go. With Lewis Hine, documentary photography moved out of the slums of New York and across the country, wherever contemporary reform movements led the way. One of Hine's major preoccupations was the abuses of child labour, and he documented this widespread evil to provide photographic evidence for the reformers to circulate and to take into the lobbies of state legislatures. To do so, he left a position as a science teacher in New York private school, but he still regarded himself a teacher and thought of the magazine-reading public as his class. Unlike Jacob Riis, who considered himself primarily a reporter and who used his pictures solely to supplement his written reportage, Hine relied chiefly on the camera to communicate his message and wrote very little once he had left the classroom. If I could tell the story in words, he said, I wouldn't have to lug a camera. So yeah, here we go. Look at these kids here. Breaker boys, who separated by hand the useless slate from a mine's yield of coal, gather for Hine's camera before the entrance to a Pennsylvania coal shaft. By the time this picture was taken, many states had laws prohibiting mine operators from hiring boys under 14, but some foremen took them as young as 6. At whatever age the children worked adult hours, pictures such as this helped point to evils of child labour, prompting enforcement of laws already on the books and enactment of better ones. Yeah. In 1908, this night messenger boy was at work at 10 p.m. The National Child Labour Committee claimed that the messenger's cap is an open sesame to the underworld. It enables him to get liquor at illegal hours or to procure opium where plain citizens would be refused. It's like a child selling a newspaper. It just looks no age. Pin setters in a bowling alley. No way. The hour was 3 a.m. when these boys were photographed at work in a bowling alley. 3 pin boys were kept out of the picture by the boss, presumably because they were even younger. So before, like, automatic pin setters in pinball alleys, they had kids doing it, you know? It's really depressing, isn't it? And, like, I think what's happening in America right now, did I read this somewhere? I'll have to find the stats on this, but I think there's, like, children doing work again. Like, I'd need to find some, I'll flash up some stats, but yeah, I don't know what the heck's going on, but I've read crazy articles of children working in agriculture and working in, like, meat packing factories and all kinds of horror show stuff, being really young. And to think that these guys, like, were fighting nearly over 100 years ago for progress. Anyway, well, if that's going on, where are all the photographs, you know? Yeah. I don't know. We're in a weird situation now, aren't we? Where, like, these guys were photographing kind of poverty and trying to fight child labour like 100 years ago, and yet I know for a fact there's been loads of cases of child labour happening in America. But where are the photo essays? You know, you see in documentary photography a lot now where back then, do you imagine there was someone saying to Lewis Hine, "Oh, you can't photograph those kids. You're not working class, you know, you're not poor, you're this, you know, this rich teacher guy with a camera. You know, what gives you the right to speak for them?" And that's, for me, just really crazy. And, like, it's good that no one did that, because if Lewis Hine had not done that, then the laws wouldn't have been changed, and we wouldn't have these photographs to look at and be like, what the hell's going on? I just feel like online you see a lot of people piling on, particularly photojournalists and documentary photographers, where they're literally shooting the messenger. Like, yes, the world is not great, and yes, there's some bad stuff happening. And if we just ignore it because someone feels like, oh, you shouldn't take those pictures, what gives you the right to take those pictures? We need them. We need them as evidence. We need to see what's going on. And yes, of course, you know, it's a lot more egalitarian now. There's people with cameras all over the world. But if you feel like you want to save the world with your camera, like, do it. Do it. That's fine, you know? And some photographers might do that when they're younger and they look back and be like, well, maybe I was a bit naive. Well, you know what? Maybe that's like a stepping stone in the journey of a photographer, you know? Maybe you should feel like you want to do some good. Maybe that's a good thing. And, you know, I often see, like, photography students that start off just doing, like, a candid snap of a homeless person, and you look at it and you just think, well, you didn't really engage with them, and you don't really know anything, and you didn't really sort of add anything to the conversation, but it's a start. It's not a great photograph. Maybe it's a bit ethically questionable, but they're 18, for God's sake, you know? They're allowed to make some mistakes on their path developing as a photographer. And all too quick, I see online people just keen to just jump on someone being like, well, how dare you say their story? Well, someone's got to do it. And if you feel like you're the right person to do it, if you feel that in your heart, then you're the right person to do it. Because if Lewis Hine or Jacob Riis had felt like, I'm not allowed to tell these stories, we wouldn't have had this. Laws wouldn't have been changed. But then, as I said, like, it looks like there's, like, child labour in America again. You know? Crazy. Okay, so, skipping forward, a nice chapter here. I just want to cover something about the Photo League, which is something I kind of knew a little bit about, but it was this amazing group in New York, and I just thought I'd read you a little bit about them. So, In 1928, before the stock market crash and the Great Depression began to spread over the country, a group of New York City motion picture and still photographers formed an organisation called the Film and Photo League. Their major aim was to record events of social significance that were often not reported in the commercial press. They named themselves the Photo League and based their documentary work on a broadly conceived credo. It read in part, "Photography has a tremendous social value. Upon the photographer rests a responsibility and duty of recording a true image of the world as it is today. The Photo League works in keeping with the traditions set by Stieglitz, Strand, Abbott and Weston. Photography has long suffered from the stultifying influence of the pictorialists. The Photo League's task is to put the camera back in the hand of honest photographers who will use it to photograph America." Yeah, Photo League. They were hampered by a lack of money, Photo League. Some League members were still in school, others held low-paying clerical jobs. A few eked out a living photographing for merchandising catalogues. They scraped together the rent for a loft which they remodelled to serve as an exhibition room, lecture hall and classroom and darkroom all in one. They approached such big-name photographers as Paul Strand, Berenice Abbott and Margaret Bjork-White to form a board of advisors. Their spirit was infectious and the big names consented. Encouraged, the youngsters began pursuing other members of the photographic elite, Roy Stryker, Edward Weston, Robert Capa and Dorothea Lange, to speak at the League and to allow their work to be exhibited there. Soon they began issuing a monthly mimeographed bulletin, photo notes devoted to documentary photography. It continued original articles, reviews of current shows and reprints of essays on the subject, as well as news events. Yeah, man. Photo notes had wide influence and drew more members into the League, where, for no charge, they could hear and interview such professionals as Henri Cartier-Bresson, Ansel Adams or Louis Hine. After Hine died in 1940, most of his work was given to the League. Wow. Wow. A major part of the League was its school, where students were taught the history, techniques and aesthetics of photography. Just as membership dues were kept low, $7 a year, the school's tuition was about $30 for a 12-session semester, and no one was turned away for lack of funds. Probably the school's most important course was a workshop on documentary photography taught by the late Sid Grossman. During World War II, though most of its members were in the armed forces overseas, the League produced documentary photographs for the Red Cross and Servicemen's Organisation. By 1947, the organisation could boast that more than 1,500 photographers had been trained in its school and darkrooms. Money was always in short supply, but at the end of that year, after strenuous fundraising, the group had substantially more than 100 members and were preparing to move to large quarters in the basement of Greenwich Village Hotel. Then an event occurred that stunned its membership. In December, the Photo League appeared on a list issued by the Attorney General of the Department of Justice and had found to be subversive to the United States. The League was shocked. It categorically denied the charge of disloyalty, describing itself as a photographic and not political organisation. Membership took a sudden leap as photographers from far away as California rallied to the League's support, and for a time things went well. But in May 1949, a former League member testifying at a trial of communist leaders implied that the League was a communist front organisation. The League challenged anyone to present an iota of evidence to prove her activities as subversive, and reiterated its stand that it was a purely photographic group. By this time, however, political tensions brought about from the Cold War had increased, and some League members, facing serious professional ostracism, felt compelled to resign. Young people, more affluent than the League generation, had been now offered a variety of photographic schools to choose from, and did not replace the members who left. By 1951, the Photo League had ceased to exist. The essay that follows presents the work of some of its members, along with their comments about the League and the influential documentary photography it produced. Wow. I'm guessing that was the whole McCarthyism thing in America. So, you know, for them to just be hammered as being a socialist group and destroyed, that's tragic. That's utterly tragic. But, you know, what an inspiring story. I love that idea. I want to make a Photo League. Can we make a Photo League, please? Anyone? Can we make a Photo League? So yeah, in this it goes through some of the photographers, and I must say I'm really sorry, I don't know a lot of these names and I might mispronounce them, but Sol Libshon, so it looks like, yeah, some street photographs from 1940 and 1945, nice compositions here, look at that, busy, 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 busy. Walter Rosenblum, just delicate. Now Sid Grossman, so he was one of the teachers and he was said to be, you know, pretty scary and be so critical of new students they might not last more than one lesson. But you know what? He's allowed to be critical. Look at these photographs. Coney Island, 1947 to 48. Look at these amazing compositions. Look at this. They're the most lovely way of filling the frame. They just fill the frame in the most beautiful ways. Yeah, they're a bit chaotic and a bit messy, but life. Oh, it just smacks of life, doesn't it? Look at that. Wonderful. Oh, I'm going to check out some more of Sid Grossman. Grossman, who died in 1955, once said, "The function of the photographer is to help people understand the world about them. He would ask his students if they ever took pictures just for themselves. He would answer for them, 'No, you don't.' And that he did not himself. Though I have boxes of pictures that nobody wants to buy, I know the time will come that they will be usable and I will have won." Oh my word, that's amazing, isn't it? Geez, that is just, wow, I hadn't read that. That's really powerful, isn't it? My word. That's really cool. Oh, Sid Grossman, you won. He's a winner. So I'm definitely going to look up some more of his work. I'm really inspired by those. Who else we got here? Jerome Liebling, East Side Window, 1948. Young boy here. Jack Manning. Morris Hubberland. Aaron Siskind. Ruth Orkin. I mean, this could be a Chris Killip, couldn't it? You know, that sort of composition, that use of framing, that depth. Summer Afternoon in the Slums, 1948. Ruth Orkin. Going to check you out too. Yeah. Elliot Ellisophan. Pronouncing that right. Lovely use of text here. Look at this. So this photographer, just in those two photos, you can see they really love using text. I like using text too, but words. But this is just really fun. I mean, look at this. Wild. Arthur Leipzig. Again, look at this composition. Great use of space. Lovely. So normally you'd have like negative space like that and there might be nothing there, but it's the drawings. It makes sense why the photographer's left that space. A shot through a window here of these kids and they look mesmerised and it just says "Watching Santa," 1944. Morris Engel, really delicate touch here. Park Avenue, 1938. Dan Viner. I mean, the cool thing is, right, there's loads of old photo books like this. They're kind of books you might find in a charity shop or an old library. And like, yeah, just because the photographs are like 80, 90, 100 years old, do not discredit them, okay? If you're a photographer and you're on the path, they are on the path before you. And yeah, like culture's changed and things have changed and products have changed and whatever's changed. But I would argue that, have we changed that much? Have we changed that much in 100 years? Humanity, have we changed that much? So again, I think there's lessons to be learned here. Lou Bernstein. Yeah, really nice Man and Wife, 1941. Coney Island, 1943. Bill Witt, that rings a bell. There we go. So yeah, man, the Photo League. Wow. Can we do a Photo League, please? In the comments, how do we do a Photo League? Yeah, I'm gonna check them out a bit more, but that seems like a really cool idea. Chapter 4 here is Honouring Humanity, and there's some greats in this one. And it says André Cortez, Paul Strand, Henri Cartier-Bresson, Dorothea Lange, and W. Eugene Smith. So we've got some heavy hitters here. And yeah, obviously André Cortez. So infantryman in the Hungarian army, Cortez chronicled World War I, lulls in the fighting like the one depicted above. Woman feeding stray cats, 1929. Yeah, I mean, look at that. I mean, it's almost like a painting, this one, isn't it? That use of composition, that's fantastic. Village near Budapest, 1919. Obviously, Cortez had a massive influence on lots of photographers, including Cartier-Bresson. Paul Strand. Again, very seminal photographer at that point. It's mentioned about him honouring the Photo League. And I don't get this photo. I flicked through and I saw this one. It's a French vineyard in 51. And like the dude looks like he's got a Hitler moustache, right? Does that look like a Hitler moustache to you? It's like post-war France, 6 years after the war ended, and you're going to rock a Hitler moustache? Is it going to mention anything in the captions? Nope, I guess we don't talk about that. There we go. Ah, this is really cool. So Henri Cartier-Bresson. Now, in a previous video about Bresson, I mentioned how, you know, photography is an amazing tool because with everyday life, you can change the world a bit. And one good example of that is, let's say there's a group of people who are despised. Let's say one half of the world is like, these people are the enemy, da 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 da. Well, check it out, man. Was this in the Cold War? Is this during the Cold War? What year is this? Yeah. So, like, during the Cold War, Cartier-Bresson went to Russia and photographed everyday life in Russia. And this is the most amazing picture here, so check this out. I mean, also, it's a bit hard to go on the caption here, because let's face it, when this book was made, the Cold War was still going on. But anyway, let's just read the caption. I'm not sure if part of it's true, but I like the story. Soviet regulations prohibited the taking of panoramic views of cities, but to Cartier-Bresson the awesome expanse of Moscow could not be documented without one. A group of students atop Lenin Hills inadvertently obliged him during an outdoor lecture. The instructor held up an aerial photograph of the Kamovniki quarter of the city for the students to compare the views before them, an allowable picture that the photographer instantly snapped. So yeah, so all these photographs here are from Cartier-Bresson's time in Russia. And again, that's really important. So, you know, if people are claiming like, you know, Cold War era, these people are the enemy, check out what he did. Even that guy's like little, is it a little trilby hat? For a minute, if I just glanced at that photo, I would have thought it was Coney Island. But it wasn't Coney Island. It says a beach outside Moscow. The beach at Silver Forest in a Moscow suburb is permeated in this picture by a mood of restrained relaxation. Anyway, like the caption's going to be a bit questionable because it was the Cold War, but visually looking at that, you take the kind of Russian text out, they're playing chess, the guy's got his fishing rod and hat, looks super American to me. So I thought that was really smart. That's a smart photo by Bresson. That's a unifying photo, you know? If you see that photograph as an American, and there's all these people saying, these people are the enemy, da-da-da-da, and you look at that picture, you're going to be like, you know what? They look pretty similar to me. This is a famous shot by Bresson that I've seen loads, which is funny, because I never really rated it that much. The shot before was way better, but this is the one you'd always see. Dorothy Lang, obviously very much the famous photographer of Migrant Mother. I'm not sure if it's covered in this book, but obviously, you know, that's what she was very, kind of what she was very much known for. Eugene Smith, just another incredible photographer I will get into in another video. Obviously did the very, very famous photo essay Country Doctor that image is from. And yeah, so there you go. What a fun little book. And yeah, I'm not sure how much that'll be. I'll try and find out how much it would cost. I'll flash the price up if you wanted to get it. It's a nice little education. And the thing is, right, in the beginning, like, people felt really emboldened by documentary photography. They saw things going on in the world. Some people saw things they didn't like, very kind of obviously terrible, like slum conditions or child labour. Bam, they went after that. Other photographers a bit more kind of, you know, delicate. Like I was saying, Bresson going in and sort of depicting Russia in a way that kind of went against the way that those in America were kind of trying to portray it as the enemy during the Cold War. Just the camaraderie of, say, the Photo League, you know? All these documentary photographers coming together feeling like they had this sort of duty to kind of show life as it was. There's a certain faith you have to have when telling a documentary story that you're going to get what you need. And I think that's why it's so difficult. Because, you know, people want the fast thing. They want to film their documentary quick. They want to make sure they get the shot they need. Or by doing that, you might miss out on, hold on a minute, the reality. So you know what? You do your post-documentary genre work. I'll hang out these, like, all these dead people here and just keep merrily trying to show photographs of the real world as it is. Because there's a little magic there, isn't there? So I hope you enjoyed that video, and next up you might have guessed some books on the side. That's right, I'm going to leap straight into a video about one of my all-time hero documentary photographers who just changed the way I saw the world and made me kind of more than anything the photographer I am today, and that's Diane Arbus. So yes, that'll be the next video. Thank you.